I'm Jennifer Hayes, 32 years old. I walked into my parents' 35th wedding anniversary party with one small hope that for just one night, we could feel like a real family again. I had driven 2 hours from Seattle, my heart heavy from years of holding them afloat. 60 people filled the room, cousins, neighbors, friends chatting and laughing, completely unaware of the storm quietly building inside me. I forced a smile, adjusted my dress, and told myself, maybe tonight will be different. Then my dad stood up, glass raised high. To our daughter, he said, his voice booming with pride, the one who's always been there, shining bright, making us proud. All eyes turned to me, but his gaze locked on my sister standing across the room in paint-stained jeans, the very image of a free-spirited artist. She's the heart of this family, he continued, beaming. Then he turned to me, his smile fading. And her, he pointed straight at me. This family has never gotten a thing from her. The room went silent. 60 pairs of eyes burned into me like fire. My sister shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. My mom nodded along, her silence louder than any insult. My chest tightened. I could have screamed. I could have listed every dollar, every sacrifice, every sleepless night I had poured into their lives, but instead I simply smiled, stood up and left. They thought I was nothing to this family, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I sat in my car, the engine off, the silence deafening after the chaos of the party. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white as my mind spiraled back through 6 years of sacrifices I'd buried deep. I wasn't ready to drive away, not yet. I needed to understand how I'd ended up here, betrayed by the family I'd carried on my back. 6 years ago, I started covering their bills. It began when my mom called, her voice tight, saying they couldn't make the mortgage after she retired from the bank. $48,000 over 6 years wired straight to their account to keep the house they loved. Then came the utility bills, $35,000 for electricity, water, and internet, because my dad's auto shop was barely breaking even. I paid without question, working late nights as a software engineer, skipping vacations, pushing my own dreams aside. They never asked how I managed, they just took. And then there was my sister. An artist always chasing her next big break, painting murals in her rented studio downtown. $10,000 of my money went to her rent for that space, supplies, even ads for her exhibitions. She'd call me excited about a new project, and I'd transfer the cash thinking it was temporary. But temporary turned into years. My parents adored her, framing her sketches in their living room, bragging about her talent at every family gathering. They never mentioned the money I sent, the hours I worked, the life I put on hold. I thought I was doing it for love, for family. But tonight, sitting in that room watching my dad raise his glass to my sister while dismissing me, I saw the truth. They didn't just take my money, they took my worth. My sister, with her carefree charm, was their pride, their heart of the family. I was the invisible one, the one who paid for their comfort, but got no credit. My mom's silence as my dad spoke cut deeper than his words. She knew what I'd done, every dollar, every sacrifice, and still she let him erase me. I replayed every moment I'd let slide. The calls where my dad praised my sister's latest painting but never asked about my job. The dinners where my mom gushed over her creativity while my promotions went unnoticed. 6 years, $147,000, and countless nights spent staring at my laptop, balancing their lives while mine slipped away. I'd told myself it was duty, that family came first. But duty didn't feel like this, like a knife twisting in my chest. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the lie they lived, the one they sold to everyone else. They painted my sister as their savior, their star, while I was just the daughter who never did anything. I'd kept quiet, thinking my sacrifices spoke for themselves. But they didn't. They never would. Not to them. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a text from my sister. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not now. The weight of those 6 years pressed against my ribs, each dollar a brick I'd carried alone. I'd given everything to keep them afloat, but tonight I realized they'd never seen me. Not really. And that hurt more than any words my dad could say. I stared out the windshield, the world blurred by tears I refused to let fall. Something shifted inside me, not anger, not yet, but a quiet resolve. I wasn't the nothing they thought I was, and I was done letting them define me. I pulled into my driveway, the 2-hour drive from my parents' house, a blur. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door to my Seattle apartment. Inside, my boyfriend Daniel waited, his calm presence a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. He sat on the sofa, a mug of coffee in hand, his steady eyes meeting mine as I walked in. He didn't need to ask what happened. My face said it all. I sank onto the sofa beside him, the weight of the night pouring out. I told him how I'd hoped the party would bring us closer, how I'd sat there expecting some acknowledgement only to be dismissed in front of everyone. I didn't repeat my dad's words. Those still stung too much, but Daniel got it. "They don't see you," he said, his voice low but firm. "You've carried them for years and they act like it's nothing. You don't owe them your silence." His words struck a chord. I'd spent years hiding my sacrifices, thinking they'd notice on their own. They hadn't. Not my parents, not my sister. Daniel leaned closer, his hand resting on mine. "Tell the world," he urged. "Let them know what you've done. You deserve to be seen." I hesitated. Going public felt like betraying family, but the pain of being invisible was worse. I was done swallowing it. I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram. My fingers shook as I typed each word, a release of years of pent-up frustration. 6 years, $48,000 for their mortgage, $35,000 for their bills, $10,000 for my sister's art studio. And tonight they said I've given this family nothing. I hit post before I could change my mind. The screen lit up with my truth, raw and unfiltered, for all 2,000 of my followers to see. Notifications poured in almost instantly. A college friend messaged, "You paid that much? That's unreal." A coworker commented, "You're a hero for this." My Aunt Diane, who lived across state lines, sent a private message, "I had no idea, sweetheart. You're stronger than they'll ever understand." Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that someone out there saw my worth. I scrolled through the reactions, my heart pounding with a mix of relief and adrenaline. My family hadn't seen the post yet. They were probably still at the restaurant, scrambling to wrap up the party, unaware of the truth now spreading online. I set my phone down, my pulse racing. Daniel squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice steady. I nodded, but a knot formed in my stomach. I'd just laid my family's secrets bare, and there was no going back. The morning sun filtered through my apartment window, but I barely noticed. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, a cold coffee beside me. Last night's decision to go public had cracked something open inside me, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just done hiding the truth. I was done carrying their weight. Today, I'd make it real. I logged into my bank account, the screen glowing with transactions I'd made for years without a second thought. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, steady but heavy with the gravity of what I was about to do. First, the restaurant bill from the anniversary party, $6,000 for a night that ended with me erased. I clicked into the payment portal, found the pending charge and canceled it. The confirmation popped up. Payment declined. I exhaled, a weight lifting off my chest. Next, the mortgage. $48,000 over 6 years had kept my parents' house from foreclosure. I opened the recurring transfer, the one I'd set up when my mom called desperate after her retirement. My dad's auto shop couldn't cover it, she'd said. I'd paid ever since. I selected the payment, my cursor lingering on cancel recurring transaction. One click, and it was gone. No more monthly transfers. No more bailing them out. Then the credit cards. My parents' accounts linked to mine for emergencies had racked up $35,000 in bills, groceries, utilities, random expenses they never explained. I removed my card from their accounts, each click a small rebellion. The final confirmation read, "Link removed." I leaned back, my heart racing. They'd have to figure it out now. The last one stung the most, my sister's studio. $10,000 over the years to keep her downtown space. Her paints, her dreams alive. She'd call bubbly, promising her next exhibition would be the one. I'd believed her, paid the rent, bought her time. But no more. I logged into the payment app, found the recurring transfer for her studio, and canceled it. The screen flashed, transaction stopped. I stared at it, my throat tight. Her art was her life, but I couldn't keep funding it while she took me for granted. I closed the laptop, the silence in my apartment deafening. "I'm done carrying them," I said to myself, the words settling into my bones. A rush of relief washed over me, like shedding a coat I'd worn too long. But beneath it, a dull ache pulsed. These were my parents, my sister. I'd spent years tying my worth to their survival, and now I was cutting that cord. It felt freeing, but it hurt more than I expected. I glanced at my phone, still silent. No calls, no texts. They hadn't noticed yet, hadn't seen the Instagram post or felt the consequences of my actions. They would soon. The restaurant would call about the unpaid bill. The bank would flag the missed mortgage payment. My sister would get a notice about her studio rent. I pictured their confusion, their panic, and a part of me flinched. But another part, the part that had been invisible for too long, stood firm. I'd given everything, and they'd called it nothing. Now they'd see what nothing really meant. By midday, my phone was buzzing nonstop, the screen lighting up with notifications I didn't want to face. 30 missed calls, 15 from my mom, 10 from my dad, 5 from my sister Amanda. Voicemails piled up, each one more frantic than the last. I let them sit unopened as I stirred a second cup of coffee I wouldn't drink. They'd found out. The house of cards I'd held up for years was collapsing, and they were scrambling. It started with the restaurant. The manager had called my parents demanding payment for the $6,000 bill from their anniversary party. My dad's voice cracked in one voicemail, accusing me of sabotaging their night. My mom left another, her tone sharp. "How could you let this happen?" They didn't mention the mortgage yet, but I knew the bank would send a notice soon. $48,000 in payments gone. They'd feel that sting when the first missed payment hit. Amanda's messages were the loudest. Her gallery had called furious about an unpaid studio rent, $10,000 I'd covered over the years. Without my money, the landlord locked her out, and her big break, a contract with a local gallery for a solo show, was canceled. "You knew how much this meant to me," she said in a voicemail, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. Then they saw the Instagram post. My mom's next voicemail was a mix of panic and rage. "Everyone's talking about it," she said. "Your cousins. Our neighbors. They're asking why you'd air our business like this." My dad left another. His tone colder. "You're tearing this family apart." Amanda texted a string of messages. "You had no right. You think you're better than us?" I scrolled through them, my stomach twisting. The post had spread, and they were drowning in the fallout. I finally picked up when Amanda called again, her name flashing on my screen. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "The gallery dropped me. The studio's gone. You can't just do this." I took a breath, steadying myself. "Figure it out," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've been figuring it out for years. Now it's your turn." She started to argue, but I hung up, my hand trembling. My mom called next, then my dad, but I let the calls go to voicemail. Their words, anger, blame, desperation, washed over me, but I didn't waver. I stared at my phone, the screen now quiet. They were panicking just as I'd known they would. The restaurant, the house, the studio, it was all unraveling. For years I'd been their safety net, catching every fall. Now without me, they were facing the reality they'd ignored. I didn't feel triumph. Not exactly. There was a hollowness, a space where their gratitude should have been. But I'd made my choice, and I wasn't going back. A week later, the fallout was undeniable. My parents' world was crumbling, and I wasn't there to catch them this time. My phone had gone quiet, no more frantic calls, no more pleading voicemails. They'd tried reaching me for days, but I'd stayed silent, letting the consequences of my choice unfold. I wasn't heartless, but I was done being their lifeline. They had to face reality now. The restaurant hadn't let up. The $6,000 bill from their anniversary party was still unpaid, and the manager had escalated to threats of legal action. My dad, always proud of his small auto shop, couldn't scrape together the cash. He'd called a lawyer only to learn a lawsuit could cost more than the bill itself. My mom, usually composed, was unraveling. She'd been sorting through overdue notices at their kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared family dinners years ago. The mortgage payment, $48,000 I'd covered over 6 years, was missed for the first time. The bank sent a warning, the first step toward foreclosure. Amanda faced her own reckoning. Her downtown studio, funded by the $10,000 I'd paid over the years, was now a locked door. The landlord had given her a week to settle the overdue rent, but without my support, she couldn't pay. The gallery, once eager for her solo show, had severed their contract. Her paintings, stacked in a friend's garage, were gathering dust instead of buyers. She'd called the gallery manager, begging for another chance, but they were firm. No payment, no deal. Her dream, the one my parents had always championed, was slipping away. Then there were the medical bills. My mom's old knee injury had flared up, requiring a specialist visit they couldn't afford. $7,000 in unpaid hospital fees from past treatments piled on top of new charges. They'd relied on my credit card to cover those costs, $35,000 over the years, but that safety net was gone. My dad left a voicemail, not angry this time, just tired. "We need to talk." I didn't call back. I couldn't keep fixing their lives while they ignored mine. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my world. At the office, I was knee-deep in a new software project, coding late into the night. My team was counting on me, and for the first time in years, I felt unburdened, free to focus on my own goals. Daniel was my anchor. We'd cook dinner together, his quiet humor pulling me out of my head. One night, as we chopped vegetables, he said, "You're lighter now. Like you're finally you." He was right. The weight of their expectations was gone, replaced by a clarity I hadn't known I'd lost. My parents and Amanda kept trying to reach me. Texts, emails, even a letter slipped under my door. I didn't open them. Each attempt felt like a pullback to a life where I was invisible. I wasn't ready to face their excuses, their demands. They were learning what it meant to stand on their own, just as I was learning to stand without them. The distance hurt, but it also felt right. The doorbell rang on a quiet Sunday evening, sharp and insistent, pulling me from my thoughts. I was in my Seattle apartment sorting through emails after a long day at work. I glanced at the clock, 7 p.m. My heart sank as I checked the peephole. My mom and dad stood on the porch, their faces tense under the dim glow of the overhead light. I hadn't spoken to them in weeks, not since I'd stopped answering their calls. I opened the door, steeling myself. Jennifer, my mom, started, her voice soft but shaky. "We need to talk." My dad stood behind her, hands in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. I stepped aside, letting them in, but kept my distance. They sat on my couch, the same one where I'd poured my heart out to Daniel. I stood, arms crossed, waiting. "We're sorry," my mom said, her hands twisting together. "We didn't mean to upset you at the party. It was a misunderstanding." My dad nodded, finally meeting my gaze. "You know how these things go," he added. "We were celebrating, got carried away. You took it the wrong way." His words landed like a slap. A misunderstanding. I'd carried their lives for years, and they were calling it a mix-up. I took a breath, my voice steady. 6 years. $147,000. That's what I gave you. $48,000 for your mortgage twice. $35,000 for your credit cards, groceries, utilities. $10,000 for Amanda's studio. $6,000 for your party. And you stood there in front of everyone saying, I gave this family nothing. My mom's eyes widened, her mouth opening, but I kept going. I paid for your house, your bills, her dreams, and you never once said thank you. My dad shifted, his face hardening. You're blowing this out of proportion, he said. You've always been too sensitive. We didn't mean it like that. My mom chimed in, her tone pleading. We're family, Jennifer. Families help each other. You can't just walk away. I stared at them, their words echoing the same dismissal I'd heard my whole life. They weren't sorry, not really. They were here because they were desperate, not because they saw me. I'm done. I said, my voice calm but unyielding. I've helped enough. You need to leave. My mom's face crumpled, tears welling up, but my dad stood, his jaw tight. You're making a mistake, he said. You'll regret this. I opened the door, the cool night air rushing in. Maybe, I replied. But that's my choice. They walked out, their footsteps heavy on the porch. I closed the door, the lock clicking into place, and leaned against it. For the first time, I felt the weight of their expectations lift, replaced by a quiet strength I was just beginning to understand. 2 weeks after my parents left my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Can we talk? Just us. Coffee shop on 5th tomorrow, 3 p.m. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep the distance I'd fought so hard to maintain. But another part was curious, why now, after everything? I typed back, okay, and hit send, wondering if I'd regret it. The next afternoon, I walked into the coffee shop on 5th Street, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and the hum of quiet conversations. I chose a corner table, the soft light filtering through the window casting shadows on my untouched latte. Amanda arrived alone, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes darting as she spotted me and sat down. She clutched a paper cup, her fingers tapping the lid. Jennifer, she started, her voice low. I know things are messed up. I didn't realize how much you were doing for me, for us. She paused, glancing at the table. The studio. $10,000 over the years. I got used to it. I shouldn't have. I leaned back, my expression neutral, waiting for the catch. There always was one with her. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. Mom and Dad, they were just proud of me. They didn't mean to hurt you. They thought you were okay, that you didn't need the attention. Her words stung, not because they were new, but because they confirmed what I'd always known. Amanda was their golden child, the one they'd pinned their hopes on. I was the steady one, the one who didn't need praise because I always delivered. I took a slow sip of my latte, letting her words hang in the air. You were the daughter they loved. I said, my voice calm but cutting. I paid for your dreams, $10,000 for your studio, $147,000 for the whole family over 6 years. And none of you ever noticed me. Now it's your turn to step up. Her eyes widened, a flicker of guilt crossing her face, but she didn't argue. I'm trying, she said, her voice breaking. The gallery dropped me. I'm working odd jobs to cover the studio rent, but it's not enough. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the cup. I didn't know how hard it was for you. I wanted to believe her, but the years of being invisible held me back. She wasn't here to make things right. She was here because she was desperate. You'll figure it out, I said, echoing the words I'd used before. You're talented. You always were. But I can't carry you anymore. Amanda stared at me, her expression a mix of confusion and resignation. She nodded slowly, stood, and walked out, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her new reality. I watched her go, the coffee shop's soft light framing her retreating figure, and felt a pang of something, not regret, but the ache of letting go. Months had passed since my last conversation with Amanda, and the silence between me and my family had settled into a new normal. I'd stopped checking my phone for their messages, stopped wondering if they'd reach out again. My life in Seattle moved forward a rhythm of work and quiet evenings with Daniel unbroken by their demands. But I'd heard whispers through mutual acquaintances my parents and sister were navigating a reality I'd once shielded them from, and it wasn't pretty. My parents had sold their house. The home I'd poured $48,000 into over 6 years to keep them afloat was gone. A realtor's sign had gone up in their front yard, a stark for sale marker against the faded paint of the porch where I'd spent childhood summers. They couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments without my help, and the bank's warnings had turned into action. They'd moved to a small apartment in Renton, a suburb south of Seattle, trading their spacious 3-bedroom for a cramped 1-bedroom unit. I pictured my mom arranging her old furniture in a space too small to hold it. My dad staring out a window that overlooked a parking lot instead of their old garden. It wasn't the life they'd planned, but it was the one they'd chosen when they took me for granted. Amanda's world had shifted too. The sister I'd once funded with $10,000 for her art studio was no longer painting. Her dreams of gallery shows and critical acclaim had faded, replaced by the grind of a part-time job at a coffee shop. I'd heard from a mutual friend that she wore a green apron now steaming milk and taking orders for minimum wage. The downtown studio, once her creative haven, was leased to someone else. Her canvases, those vibrant bursts of color she'd poured her heart into, were stacked in a storage unit untouched. She'd tried to keep up picking up freelance gigs and side hustles, but the art world had moved on without her. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing this, just a quiet sadness for the spark she'd lost. I hadn't spoken to any of them since our last meeting at the coffee shop. Their attempts to reach me had dwindled, fewer texts, no more voicemails. I'd made my stance clear and they'd stopped pushing. Instead, I poured my energy into my own life. At work, I'd taken on a lead role in a new project, guiding my team through late-night coding sessions and client presentations. My salary, once stretched thin by their needs, now funded my own plans, a savings account for a future home weekend trips with Daniel. We'd started hiking on Saturdays, our boots crunching through the trails of Discovery Park, the Puget Sound stretching out below us. One afternoon, as we sat on a bench overlooking the water, Daniel took my hand. "You're building something real," he said. "Not for them, for you." His words settled into me, a confirmation of the path I'd chosen. The distance from my family wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I'd spent years tying my worth to their survival, measuring my value by what I could give. Now I was learning to measure it by my own choices, my work, my relationships, my peace. I didn't know if my parents or Amanda would ever understand, but that wasn't my burden anymore. They were finding their way, just as I was finding mine. A year had passed since the night that changed everything, and I stood in a small garden in Seattle, surrounded by twinkling lights and the soft hum of a summer evening. Daniel and I were getting married, not in a grand venue, but in a warm, intimate space with 20 close friends. The air was filled with the scent of lavender and freshly cut grass, and my simple, flowing white dress caught the breeze as I looked at Daniel. His steady, warm smile reminded me why I had chosen this life, this moment, and this man. My parents and sister weren't there. I hadn't invited them, and we hadn't spoken in months. Their absence was a choice, one I'd made to protect my peace. I'd heard they were still struggling with their new reality, living leaner, working harder, but I didn't let those thoughts linger. This day was mine. The ceremony was short, but heartfelt. We exchanged vows beneath an arch of wildflowers, promising to build a life together, not just for each other, but for ourselves. Daniel's hand in mine felt like a promise, fulfilled, a future I had worked so hard to earn. As we danced to a soft acoustic song, the lights twinkling above us, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. My work as a software engineer had given me stability, and a promotion last month had strengthened my savings. The funds that had once been drained by my family's needs, $147,000 over 6 years, now fueled my dreams, a home travel, and maybe even a family of our own one day. I thought briefly of my parents now living in a cramped apartment in Renton and Amanda serving coffee instead of painting. Their choices had led them there just as mine had led me here. I didn't hate them, but I didn't owe them either. I'd learned that love doesn't mean carrying someone else's weight forever. Setting boundaries and choosing myself had been the hardest and best decision I'd ever made. As the night wound down, I looked out at our friends, their faces glowing in the candlelight, and felt a deep gratitude. Happiness comes when you choose yourself, I thought, and the words settled deep in my heart. To everyone who has followed this story, thank you for staying with me until the very end. Your time and support mean the world to me. Here's to choosing your own happiness wherever it leads you.